Hello, everybody. Malcolm Kaplan here from Moral Clarity with the usual beautiful Haifa coastline behind me. Today, I want to talk about something wider than a Jewish or Israel-centric issue, but one that affects everybody, which is how centre-right political parties are struggling at the ballot box. Centre-right political parties have a problem. They cannot win elections. Canada and Australia are the latest countries where incompetent, morally confused, terror facilitating leftist governments have somehow managed to retain office. It just beggars belief. A big reason for this is US President Donald Trump's influence, which is what the media latched onto in their coverage of the Canadian and Australian elections. That is true. However, there's also a longer running problem of the right or the centre-right's inability to provide an attractive vision of the future. Let's start with Trump and the so-called Trump effect. Trump's electoral success turned right-wing politics on its ear and had centre-right politicians dancing in jigs of glee. They believed that he had found the magic formula for winning elections. Yet they soon discovered that much of Trumpism does not appeal to voters abroad. There was a former Australian ambassador to the US, whose name escapes me now, but it really doesn't matter. And he said that Americans and Australians were 80% the same, but where they were different, they were very different indeed. I think that's right. And Trump is a product of brash American culture that is very different from any other Anglosphere culture. Conservative parties elsewhere also do not have candidates with Trump's personality. Love him or loathe him, and I am not a fan. He is an iconoclast, and that is a key part of his success. The fact that in Kamala Harris, he faced a candidate with more flaws than my handwriting did not do him any harm either. Canadian opposition leader Pierre Poilievre and Australian opposition leader Peter Dutton are much saner and much duller, but both not only lost the election, they even lost their own seats as voters delivered what could really only be called a stinging rebuke. They both spent months trying to sound like Trump, hoping to replicate his success, only to find themselves scurrying to the distance from Trump when they saw the chaos of his first 100 days. This gave muddled signals and made voters very wary. The timing really did not help. Canada and Australia held elections during Trump's tumultuous first weeks and months in office, where he implemented his policies aggressively in areas such as immigration, tariffs, telling Europe it was largely on its own defence-wise. Trump also served up big surprises, such as wanting to make Canada and the Danish dependency of Greenland become part of the US. Such rapid change and tumult terrified many voters up north in Canada and way down south in Australia. Voters looked at the chaos Trump was bringing and decided they just didn't want any part of that, and who can blame them? Ironically, Trumpism has made it harder for right-wing parties elsewhere to win office. The US president may be leading a US backlash against the American left and its successors, but it also seems to have halted the backlash against them elsewhere in the West. This ought to be worrying for diaspora Jews. The progressive governments of Canada under Mark Carney and previously Justin Trudeau, and in Australia under Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, have allowed Semitism to surge almost unchecked. Canada's 400,000 Jews and Australia's 110,000 Jews face threats, physical attacks, vandalism, boycotts, and even arson attacks. Many are looking at emigrating to Israel, and they probably should, as readers know or have written elsewhere. This may be, I was thinking about it, the first time in either country's history that people are fleeing from Australia and Canada rather than to them to escape persecution. That is an absolute indictment. And nowhere, or no one rather, anywhere in the world views either countries as the bastions of tolerance that they once were, boasted to be. It may take a generation, even two, for them to regain their international standings. And neither country can claim anymore to be the multicultural success story and neither has a plan to combat the radical Islamist forces that are gaining influence in their countries. In fact, either knowingly or out of sheer ignorance, they are appeasing and facilitating jihadism for electoral gain. The technical term for this is slow-motion national suicide. Slow-motion national suicide. I know it sounds like something out of a dark fantasy film, but when it comes to Islamism, they really are unleashing powerful forces that they do not understand. The likes of Albanese and Carney are too stubborn or too far down the ideological rabbit hole to listen to those who do understand. I'm not sure how bad it will have to get before they can see it, but it surely will be too late by now. Yet, to put all the blame on Trump is too easy. Centre-right parties have a bigger problem. They are not offering voters an alternative vision. They have done an excellent job of criticising what is wrong on the left, such as woke madness, skyrocketing national debt, persistent inflation, and supporting Islamist terror groups, to name but a few. Yet none has offered a viable alternative. Consider the issue of global warming and efforts to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Leftist governments speak of it in catastrophic terms, like something out of Deuteronomy. And they're busy building unstable green power stations with money they do not have. What's worse, they are spending billions of dollars and destroying their own prosperity on a goal that they will fail to achieve. These countries are just too small to make a dent in the tsunami of carbon emissions that countries such as America, China, and India are emitting. Making yourself poorer so you can fail to reach goal makes very little sense. And that's a pretty tough message for people to hear. Parties on the right, though, don't have an alternate strategy. They want to decarbonise more slowly, retain fossil fuels, spend more on adapting to the impact of a warmer planet rather than mitigating. The problem here is that this does not address the actual problem of climate change itself, and voters can see that. Likewise, on immigration, particularly the sensitive issue of immigration from Muslim countries, the progressives in power do not even accept there is a problem. They seem to have what we call a selective vision and cannot see Muslim immigrants, even though they are hurling Molotov cocktails at Canadian and Australian Jews, most of whom have never stepped foot in Israel, let alone being responsible for the policies of its government. Right-wingers such as Polivier and Duff, to be fair, have courageously addressed this issue head-on, but they fail to do so in a way that makes them sound reasonable and not nasty. It was just all too easy to paint them as far-right racists and xenophobes. This issue is really concerning. Emboldened left-wing governments are drifting further left into their dystopia where words have no meanings, morality is subjective, and the defence of the nation-state against Islamism and other international forces do not matter. If the centre-right cannot make up dent in the left's electoral success, it paves the way for far-right parties to step up and say, right, leave it to us. Far-right parties are making progress right across Europe on this dynamic. France, Germany, Hungary, Croatia, the Netherlands are among the countries that have turned sharply rightwards, even though Europe's right-wing parties are extremely varied in terms of their beliefs and in terms of the threat they pose. They're certainly doing pretty well in the polls. It's hard to see a future where hard-right and jihadist forces do not clash in Europe. For Jews, this is deeply worrying. Jews fare poorly under both groups. Still, Jews are lucky in one way. Jews have Israel, a homeland and a protectorate to which they can retreat. Non-Jews have nowhere to go as authoritarian forces loom from the left and the right. Just to wrap up, centre parties need to start working on offering hope and vision, not just critiques of the left, or they will hand political power to the psychopathic extremists that everyone, not just Jews, should fear. I guess I should close off on that cheery note before I get depressed. Have a great weekend, everyone. See you next time.